Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we're taking a look at the latest way that you can play Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis games. That's on your Nintendo Switch, and it's through the Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pack, which was announced during the latest Nintendo Direct. And alongside that announcement came a lot of question marks, price points, emulation, library, the expansion of it. Would other consoles be added? And if so, would they be in a new tier? How would all of this work? We got some answers on things, but now the service is out. We've been able to tinker with it and play around with it, and I'm ready to deliver some of my thoughts on it. One of the building blocks for Retro Rebound was not only the celebration of more nostalgic, older games and bringing people back to those times, but as the banner on the channel states, a blending of modernism. This is one of those perfect examples because I feel like the content creation space surrounding Nintendo is very, honestly, fanboyish, and they don't hold them accountable nearly enough. This is an example where they're robbing people blind again with nostalgia value. I'm here to explain why. So get cozy. I hope you enjoy this video, and if you do, consider checking out some of our other content and subscribing. With that, let's talk about Nintendo 64 games on Nintendo Switch. So right now you can upgrade your current Nintendo Switch online subscription service to a new tier, which is the expansion pack. You can either do an individual membership alone, which costs $50 US, while a family plan subscription, which covers up to 8 Nintendo accounts across multiple Switch systems, will cost you $80. Currently, existing members can upgrade at a discounted rate of $25, which is what I personally did. If you upgrade and unlock this service, you'll have access to the current Nintendo 64 games, Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Star Fox 64, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, Mario Tennis, Dr. Mario 64, Win Back Covert Operations, Sin and Punishment, and Yoshi's Story. On the front of Sega Genesis, you'll have access to Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Streets of Rage 2, Castlevania Bloodlines, Contra Hardcore, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, Golden Axe, Echo the Dolphin, Gunstar Heroes, Musha, Phantasy Star 4, Rise Star, Shining Force, Shinobi 3, and Strider. Nintendo does plan on expanding that library over time, and in fact, Spawnwave Media will be joining us in our next video here on Retro Rebound to talk about some games that we both hope to see get added to this service. So a shout out to Spawnwave for joining us. That'll be out next week. Keep an eye out for that. But now let's talk general impressions, because again, I think that Nintendo has completely banked in on the idea of this is nostalgia and people remember the good times, so they won't care about our effort level. When firing this up, there were some really strong examples of how this service could shine. One of them was through Win Back Covert Operations. I'd actually never heard of this game and I never played it. When firing it up, I was pleasantly surprised to find kind of Nintendo 64's own Metal Gear. It played, looked, and operated that way. But there were little changes here, like for example, being able to move the right thumbstick and the camera in Win Back would actually rotate. I know it sounds crazy to praise them for, but this type of controller mapping was positive for the experience. It's because it reminds me of when I was playing Rare Replay over on the Xbox One when that came out. When it released, it came with a N64 gem called Jet Force Gemini, and it was there that you had a decent third-person shooter that was completely marred by bad controls. In Rare Replay, you can actually tweak the controlling layout and it plays like a traditional third-person shooter, which I think absolutely elevates the experience because you're not constantly fighting with it. However, with an already ridiculous controller in the Nintendo 64, as much as I love it, that thing's an abomination, just take one look at it, I have to say that I thought this was a good opportunity to right some of the wrongs. You have a traditional controller, it's Nintendo's own hardware, it's Nintendo's own games, you can map them to your desire, personally tailoring each experience to the Joy-Cons as well as the traditional N64 controller that you can buy right now. I was so disappointed when you take one look at this controller mapping. I don't know how they made an old complex controller even more complex, but they did so. And I don't think it's a good look at all because it makes emulation available for free look even better than it already was. Of course, there is the value of taking these games on the go, which we'll talk about separately in a little bit. But for me personally, the controller mapping was egregious. And when you take a look at the price tag of the accessories that would go alongside this and their limited availability as well, it makes it even more frustrating and head scratching how they handled this whole entire launch. Plus the price tag on top of it, which is still heinous. But again, it goes back to Nintendo cashing in on nostalgic value. The reason I say that is because you look at something like Mario 3D All-Stars, a limited release for one of Nintendo's most popular IP to, of course, have that artificial short supply where everyone gets their $60 squeezed out of them. They take it off the digital marketplace, but suddenly we see Mario 64 will forever be available through the Nintendo Switch expansion pack service. It's a bit of a head scratcher, but in the terms of play, each of these games looked sharp, they felt good. Certain games reminded me, wow, these series have come very far. I'm talking about the likes of Mario Kart 64 and Mario Tennis, especially Mario Kart, where I was just accelerating in circles and thinking of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe the whole time going, wow, they've really taken this series forward. It's such a complex, fun kart racer. They've evolved the maps that already exist in Mario 64 in such a reliable and strong way that why would I ever want to go back and play these? But of course, there's nostalgic value. And a lot of that comes through the online play, which I think shines here in this service as it did with the SNES, as it did with the NES, and it will here and anything else that they add here into this expansion pack. Because couch co-op was the wave during these days. It was always fun to get some buddies together and play these games side by side. Nowadays, of course, with the way the world is, but a lot of people just being shut-ins like myself, you like to do things online. Having this option here is great because, again, through emulation, that type of stuff can always be complex and annoying. And with this, it's just a simple invite and it's handled. And you can start playing Mario Kart online with friends. You can start playing Mario Tennis online with friends. But overall, the package of N64 games currently is pretty thin. They've got some of the right classics here, but it's going to take some major additions, which we'll talk about in that separate video. But some of them that they have confirmed are Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, Mario Golf, Pokemon Snap, F-Zero X, Paper Mario, Banjo-Kazooie, and Kirby 64, The Crystal Shards. So they already have some upcoming. It'll be interesting to see how frequent the release schedule is. I'm assuming every month we will get at least 2 N64 games, but we'll see if I am correct on that. But right now, I think that they sort of missed the ball on this one. I did do some visual testing as well when I docked my Switch and checked this out. I also have the Eon, for those who don't know what this is. It is an official HDMI adapter for the Nintendo 64 that actually will scale up the imaging. So I did some side-by-side comparisons with this here, and I have to say that overall, Nintendo did a pretty solid job sharpening things up. The character models especially look good, and I thought this was most noticeable during Star Fox 64. When I was playing that, I went, you know, this looks good. Again, I've said this before with a game like Golden Sun, which we talked about recently on the channel, where there is something about the simplistic polygonal status of these older graphics that I think speaks to a particular time period, and because of its simplicity, it looks absolutely beautiful. I think Star Fox 64 is one of those rare examples where something along the lines of Yoshi's Story I thought looked a little stretched. It looked a little too pixelated in my opinion, so there are some hits and there are some misses. Now, one thing that absolutely hits, and I think it will continue to hit when we get around to the Steam Deck later this year, is handheld play. We all know we're big advocates of handheld gaming here on Retro Rebound. In fact, we'll have some cool, let's just say, handheld content in the future. Thank you, Funny Playing, because we're going to do a little bit of tweaking down the line. But you can play N64 and Sega Genesis games on the go. Now, with the Sega Genesis library, I didn't test this as deeply because here's the thing is a lot of these games are already available through the Sega Genesis collection, which you could buy physically on top of a ton of other games available. But I understand the novelty of having it all there, having it all available. But when it comes to N64 games, to me, that's where I was like, yes, having these on the go is the move. And of course, it cycles us back to my point of controller mapping being a problem. But having these on the go, of course, it's a novelty, but it's one that speaks so deeply to my core. It's one I appreciate so much, and it's the one thing that held me into a positive direction with this subscription service is the ability to play these in bed on the go, because again, you have to think of how transformative in a lot of ways the N64 was, the types of games it managed to squeeze on these small cartridges that were fitting on full discs for the PS1. It was a technical marvel in probably not the best way. So being able to take these games that were just a number of megabytes and squeezing them down and putting them now onto the Switch, it's a cool moment where it excited me more than it probably should. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of nostalgic value attached here, and Nintendo just continues to take it to the bank on this type of stuff, where I just think that their effort here was really disappointing. The reason I say that is because they have yet to show me why Nintendo Switch Online has to exist in place of something like Virtual Console. They really haven't shown me that yet. I know why it works for Nintendo. I know people write in about that saying, well, Maddie, it's because they want money and money is in subscription services. I know that, but we're the consumer. So what is Nintendo offering us other than a half-baked service right now with a small selection of games that play in arguably their worst state in a controller point of view? That's the issue here, is I know why it works for Nintendo, but Nintendo has yet to compel me to be a consistent sub for this. The only thing that works in their direction is it's a one-time annual payment. Yeah, $50 a year, not too bad, especially if you're upgrading at a discounted rate, $25 for the first time. Sure, not too bad. But I think this is absolutely one that you hold off on, pocket your cash. I know it can be very alluring to get a part of this service and a part of that nostalgic hype, but I think it's a tremendously disappointing effort. And until they at least add more games, which at the end of the day is what we care about, please save your money, because Nintendo has dropped the ball on this one and they're hoping that you don't care because they got a couple of games that you remember fondly during a certain point in your life. Certainly, we're all guilty of that at one point or another, but this is where willpower is demanded, because they are not showing us why we need to be subscribed at the end of the day. And that's something we need to stick on, because maybe one day we do get that Virtual Console where you can start to play GameCube games, Game Boy games. That would be excellent. But I think, of course, the expectation is, based off what we saw in a recent data mining for Nintendo Switch Online, is they'll continue to add consoles to this service. And that's fine and all, but again, it comes down to controller mapping, visuals, and the amount of games in the library. Right now, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 Nintendo 64 games to start things off, I don't think there's enough there, because most of these games are fun little quick plays like Mario Kart 64 and Mario Tennis and Dr. Mario 64. There's not a lot of depth, if you will, to these games where you're going to be done with them pretty quickly. So you really have a small selection of titles like Ocarina of Time, like Super Mario 64, which they just sold to you already, where you can dive back in and say, okay, I've got something here. Again, I do not want to disregard people's nostalgia, but for me, this was not a worthwhile endeavor and money that I wish I had back in my pocket. I don't speak too much on the side of the Sega Genesis stuff, which is included in this package. There's also the Animal Crossing expansion, which I'm not an Animal Crossing fan, so I don't really care about that. We could argue that's a part of the price point. But for me, with Sega Genesis already having a lot of those games available, it's really about the Nintendo 64 games. And I think when I've looked online at reactions to the service, no one's really talking about Sega Genesis. It's just about N64. So I hope they add more to the library. I hope that the controller remapping works wonders for people. It's still not that good, and that's really unfortunate. So that's all I've got to say about Nintendo Switch's online expansion pack. Not a good showcase from Nintendo. And if you've played it, let me know what you're thinking in the comments down below. Certainly looking forward to reading your thoughts. And until then, I'll see you next time in the next Retro Rebound. Peace out.